Hey, what's up everybody? Onepeg here. So in today's video, a summary of the first, Tavern Table, Dark and Darker devcast that was run by Odin and Grayson. And for those of you that don't know, Odin has been in and around the community for a long time, started off as a moderator on the Discord, and then ultimately ended up into a paid position where he's doing community management work for Ironmace Games. So Odin and Grayson kicked things off, and although they weren't planning on having SDF and Terry ended up joining the devcast a little bit later on into it. For those of you that want to see the uncut version of that, there is a live podcast or reaction stream, if you want to call it that, where live today on YouTube, I ended up watching that along with everyone in chat as a bit of a watch party. So thanks to the bunch of folks that decided to come out and hang out for that. Unfortunately, and to a lot of people's chagrin, I obviously was talking and commentating through that, and there is some talking over the top of a lot of the yapping that went on. So I apologize for that, but it is what it is. And this is all talking about the new patch, by the way. Everything that they talked about for the purpose of this was stuff that's coming up in the next patch in 5 days on the 18th of December. The first thing that they showed was the preview of the gems system. So we have a new vendor that's going to be called the Goldsmith vendor for the sockets system. The way that this works is depending on the rarity of the item that you are trying to modify stats. The gem system is for stat modification. The rarity of the item determines the rarity of the gem that you would need in order to be able to modify the stats of that item. So if you have a blue item, you need blue gems. If you have a purple item, you need purple gems, etc., etc. It does not seem that, I guess, in the case of uniques, you would need some form of unique level treasure, but I'm not sure if there are that many, like, ultimate quality gems really dropping. I know that they do drop, it's just a matter of rarity. So the most likely thing that you would see is probably somewhere around, like, the purple variety that's going to be really reliable. Legendary, obviously, being possible with royal quality gems, especially now that the drop rates are improved to what they are. What they showed, though, they did say was a preview, and they are toying with the idea of limiting the stat generation that you can get from the gems. There is already apparently or seemingly a bit of RNG with this, but that also means that people that have a lot of money can just continuously cycle gems through a weapon if they think it's worth it to get best in slot stats. However, I would like to, or I'm going to make the argument that best in slot stats should not necessarily be attainable, or if they are, then the number of stats that you should be able to roll should also be limited. Meaning in the sense of, like, let's say 2 of the 4 stats on a good weapon are not so great. You get to pick one of those to reroll. That would be the ideal way for me to think about it, as if you were doing the enchanting system in Diablo. If you give people everything, that just means that they'll be able to cycle gems through a weapon or a piece of armor until they get the absolute best in slot stats that you're capable of getting, which devalues best in slot items that would be sold on the market and only jacks up the value of gems. I don't really think that that's the way that we should go about doing it. Best in slot dropped items should still be something that actually retains or has some amount of really, really high value. But you shouldn't necessarily limit the player base from being able to get substandard or sub-bis stats, but he'll still have them categorically be the thing that you want, if that makes any sense. But anyway, that system is coming on the 18th. The next thing they talked about was Crypts. And now Crypts, we know, is becoming this randomized dungeon system. And they showed us that there's going to be a Fog of War implementation in this after all. A couple weeks ago when I talked to the devs, they said that the Fog of War system wasn't going to make it in, but apparently it is. For now, though, it seems as though the layouts are going to be randomized not in size or shape, but in contents. What I mean by that is they said in a prior devcast that there was about 50-ish or so modules that they have to choose from, and 16 of those in a 4x4 grid will be arranged for the purpose of Crypts. But they also gave us a couple of big teasers. The first is they're adding Lich to the Crypts. Now, this is a little bit confusing because they said bosses originally. Odin had said there's going to be bosses on Crypts, but then he said Lich is on Crypts, so I'm not really sure which one of those it is, but we know for sure that there's going to be a boss room and Lich is going to be in it. At the very least, we know that that's going to be true. Now, whether or not the Lich's boss room or that boss room in general is going to be on every single roll of this map, we don't know. But we do know that there's going to be one that will roll on a map at some point. How prevalent that is, we obviously will have to wait and see. Secondly, we also know with this Fog of War system, it seems to be a radius around the player model as you move through wherever you move through. Meaning that it's not going to divulge or show on the minimap what it is that you can see. It seems that the radius of what it is that's shown on the minimap around your character is a lot smaller of a distance than what it is that you'll be able to physically see with your eyes. Hopefully this is something that they will be able to improve upon, but this randomized nature will definitely keep keep the dungeon runs fresh, at least in my mind. This also comes with the concept of the continuous dungeon, meaning that as soon as you zone into a map, it will either have been on a fresh start or it will be a couple minutes, 3 minutes, hopefully 3 minutes or less into when the map begins. I don't know if it being like, say, 5 or 6 or 7 minutes into a map is where people will still be able to infill. There's going to be this infill mechanic where people will be able to spawn into a map in progress already. But when you get to around the 5+ minute mark, a lot of the really good loot, especially closer to the starting areas, will already have been picked. And mobs that you'll need for quests in order to be able to, kill them, let's say like harpies on ruins, will already have been killed. Those things get rushed right away. So I'd like to make sure that at least if we're talking about these people infilling into a map already in progress, that it's like, say, 3 minutes or less. After that, I feel like it's going to end up being a slog. Now, Ruins and Frost Cavern, Ice Abyss, and Inferno and Goblin Cave, none of those are going to be randomized. And as far as I am aware, will not have the Fog of War. If there's still a set layout, I really don't think there's a point in having the Fog of War until they are able to randomize them. But at some point in the future, all of the maps will be randomized, and they will all include this Fog of War system. And also, it appears that the shuffling is being shuffled quite a bit. Odin talked about how he walked into the Long Bridge room from a completely different angle than what he was used to, and it was very weird and disorienting, but I think in a good way. On top of this, this also means that we won't know where the extracts are on this randomized Crypts map. You'll have to find them, but we know that all the doors are going to be open. When you go from Ruins into Crypts or from Crypts into Inferno, the way it works is it queues you into another pool of people to then go into a currently in progress map or spawning new instance, along with anyone else that could be waiting in queue. This also means that the in-between vendor is not going to end up being between the maps anymore. The Expressman, even though they spent all this time trying to improve the Expressman and its functionality and get all the bugs cleaned out, is now not going to be something that they're going to use anymore. Unfortunately, that seems like it was a bit of wasted dev time, but hopefully they learned something in the process, like figuring out exactly how you want your systems to work before you implement a subsystem that you don't end up using anymore, but I suppose that's game dev. Then they showed us a preview of Sorcerer. So Sorcerer is also going to be in the game on the 18th. Grayson stated in playing the Sorcerer that it played nothing like Wizard. He said he's been playing Wizard pretty much primarily as his main class for the last 6 months, and he said that the Sorcerer plays nothing like Wizard, and going from Wizard to playing Sorc is very, very tricky, is how he put it. Those were his words. Grayson said that the spells are very different from Wizard, and then Odin added, which is a piece we already know, is that Sorcerer is going to be a cooldown-based character class, which probably means there's going to be a good reliance on resourcefulness. So rather than having spell charges like you see with the Wizard, they're going to have spells on cooldown. They also said that this takes a lot more setup and plays a lot more controlled. So not only do you have to be accurate, but you also have to weigh when exactly it is that you're going to use your spells. And from what we could tell in the preview video, these spells appear to be very elemental. So what they previewed to us, and we did not see like spell names or a spell wheel or anything like that. We just saw like a kind of a blank slate, just kind of hands casting things with visual effects. There were spells that kind of were as follows. There was a couple of different fire spells. One was like this 3-hit like release, but being able to keep moving on release, like 3-shot pew pew fire blast kind of thing. There was also a slow moving meteor style spell where it was like this ball of fire, and when it hit a character or hit its target, it kind of exploded in a small AoE, but we're not sure if it actually does AoE damage. There was a water spell that looked like a slow moving orb by itself, but also was a water spell that was combined with a fire spell. So much like Skyrim, when you had the ability to like dual cast with each hand, which I think this might even be my fault, because when we talked to the devs a long time ago about how Sorc worked, we talked about spell combinations, and Terry made a comment that SDF's eyes were lighting up like I was giving him an idea, which meant that the dev progress was going to take longer, and I needed to stop doing that. I don't know if this was actually something that was in his list of things or not, or if it was an idea that we as a community planted in his head, but either way, we have combinations of spells being cast. So there was a spell combo that looked like fire and water were mixed together, where the water spell caused a zombie to have like this watery or hazy style trail under them as it walked, and also was hit with a fire blast kind of like in the chest or in the face. It kind of like blew up on him. We don't really know what the water spell does. It could be a debuff on impact. It could be something that causes a movement slow. It could be something that debuffs magic resist. We'll have to see what it looks like again in 5 days, but water is one of the elements. There's also wind. There was a wind blast, or like a wind blast pushback, a gust of wind that pushed back one of the archer mobs. So we know that that's a thing. We also saw an earth spell that summoned a stone golem up out of the ground that threw rocks at a target, and a second earth spell that popped a pillar up out of the ground that acted like a jump pad and launched our character into the sky to get up to a second level in the middle of like the swamp area, the cistern map module. And then on top of the water spell, there was also ice. There was an ice spell cast that enchanted a weapon, or enchanted the character, his hands, or in this case a falchion that he pulled out, with ice. We actually analyzed this quite a bit because we weren't sure if the sword itself was made from ice or if it was an enchantment, but on further look, it looked as though there was kind of like these ice crystals floating around the outside of a metal falchion, and then it put like this icy sheen on it. It looked as though it was causing a bit of a movement slow. We don't know if it's a movement slow and an attack slow, and we don't know if that debuff stacks or not, and we don't know if the ice spell does additional damage or not. So obviously that's something that we all have lingering questions on and will be answered again in 5 days. Lastly, there was another spell combination between earth and fire that caused a firewall to erupt out of the ground underneath the Lich and several of his minions, which looked like it looked really good. So it looks like the Sorcerer is going to be a dynamic caster that's going to have a whole lot of like upfront damage and upfront damage push, but will end up being something that you kind of blow your load and then you have a recursion period. We all know what that's like, right, boys? Boys, right? Boys? Fellas? Anyway, there were also new map screenshots. They showed this new map. They talked about this water map, and we were kind of wondering if it was going to be more like a sunken temple kind of thing with, you know, merfolk or, you know, snake people or whatever, because we saw those character models. But it actually looks like it's going to be closer to a pirate theme, like a shipwreck off a coast somewhere, some jagged coast shipwreck. They did say that 90% of the map is going to be underwater. The devs internally have been playing on it. It's obviously not done yet, but they're going to be adding, and we knew this to be true already, swimming. There's supposed to be some kind of swimming mechanic added to the game, and there's already a swimming animation inside of the game files that we've looked at in the past. Now, whenever this comes around, we have no idea. They said it's going to be sometime in 2025, so it won't be this wipe cycle. I didn't expect it to be anyway. I figured it was going to be something after like a January hit. Probably somewhere around like March, I would say, is when this looks like it would actually come into reality. But we do have a new map coming, and it does look pretty damn cool. There was also the mention of an achievement system. They said that they are adding an achievement system to the game for this next wipe. There's going to be many, many achievements. They don't want to spoil what they are, but there will be achievements to earn. And for all of us that are completionists, we will obviously be chasing those down. They also made a major change to the quest system in general to say that the quest system is now going to be account-wide. So if you have a mission, let's say you have a quest to go and kill the Lich, it's much easier to kill the Lich on, say, a Warlock than just about everything else. So if you want to do that, you can roll a Warlock and go kill the Lich for that quest and get it done on a Warlock. There's nothing stopping you now. You don't have to start over from the beginning. There are people that will not like this, though, because there are obviously like farming strategies where you do a bunch of quests kind of toward the beginning to get yourself a loot bag, to get yourself a gold bag as a quest reward from the Goblin Merchant, just as a matter of example. That isn't something that people are going to be able to do anymore. Well, you'll be able to do it the one time, but after that, you won't be able to do it again. I wonder if like it would be possible to just reset quest progression if you wanted to, though. Like, let's say you get to a certain point or you're on a different character and you kind of want to start over. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Maybe they could make it like a once every 14 days or something. You have the ability to reset if you want to. Kind of like how they do it in Tarkov. And then last but not least, I guess, in terms of the in-game stuff, we have an arena announcement. They said that they're going back to the minted gear system, but it was a little convoluted. They said minted gear was going to be safe once again. So we don't know if it's going to be like, you're not going to be able to bring in gear into the arena unless it's minted, only minted gear allowed, or if they're just going back to the old system for like found in raid stuff with your name on it or stuff that you minted yourself from one of the vendors when you did the crafting stuff, if that's what they meant. If I could venture to guess, I think it's the second one. I think it's going to be stuff that you find or stuff that you craft will not be lost if you lose your arena round. But if you end up buying it off the market and wearing it into a match and you lose, that stuff goes to the void. I think that's the system that they're planning on going back to, even though it did seem like it was a little bit foggy. And lastly, they did make an announcement for a new wintry themed ARG. So for those of you unfamiliar, ARG stands for Alternate Reality Game. The idea being that the only people really in the know on this are people that play Dark and Darker, but it goes outside of the game. A lot of times with stuff like this, the best example that I can give is they would give like a little bit of a community puzzle, let's say. In the first instance of this is when they announced that there was going to be a troll boss for the Goblin Caves. The way that they did that was they showed a picture of what looked as though it was Central Park. It was actually something that I personally recognized. And then I went and realized that it was Central Park and followed the clues. And I said the only logical solution here would be that it's a park bench somewhere in Central Park. It seemed like the most logical solution. So I found someone that lived in New York City and was willing to go to Central Park and look around. And sure enough, underneath one of the benches, there was a picture of a QR code taped to the underside of one of the park benches. And when they scanned it, it led to an image of the troll. So we actually figured all of that out. It was kind of cool. Since then, there was a Halloween event that we just ended up seeing completed where 10 people ended up getting a prize. This time around, they did say pretty specifically in the Discord that everyone wins or everyone loses. If we solve it, we all get something. If we don't solve it, we all get nothing. And the first clue was in the video that they posted this morning, and the image of a bunch of like scraps of paper that appeared to be like shredded up in image form, a small puzzle that had to be reassembled that ended up looking like, once reassembled, into a cartoonish looking goblin wearing a Santa hat, a bag in the corner underneath what appeared to be a makeshift Christmas tree made out of ribs and a spine that skewered a bug like one of the flying beetles, and this bag on the floor that had a key label on it with an arrow pointing toward a doorway that appeared like it was, I don't know, in the Goblin Cave, or could have been like one of that little like cave door that opens with a switch over on Ruins with the skeletal mage and a couple of archers on the inside. So we don't really have a lot to go on with this. There's a lot of head scratching and questions going around. We're not really sure exactly what this leads to. The way that this has gone historically is there's like another clue that'll come out that'll make the first clue make sense. But needless to say, I will definitely be doing update videos about the ARG to see what's going on and what's happening and how things will progress and where we are looking at going, and see if we can all kind of figure out the puzzle together. That would be pretty cool, I think. So anyway, that's everything that we have for the purpose of that stream. If you want to see the unabridged version, you can go back and look at the VOD that I took from today when I was live over on YouTube. You just rewind to the beginning of that VOD, and that will have the podcast in its entirety. Although there was a lot of mumbling and I kind of talked over him a bit, so apologies on that, but you know, we were live and I had a stream to run and there was a lot of yapping going on. Anyway, fellas, I thank you so much for coming and checking out this video. If you'd be so kind as to sub the channel here, that would be amazing. It really, really does matter. Otherwise, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/Onepeg, where I'm live every single day around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Maybe come and check out one of those streams. That would also be really cool. Also, we're doing a big push now into the vertical, like, media format stuff. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, actually, at Onepeg or at Onepeggers, if you're looking at looking up me on Instagram. So I'll be posting all kinds of like meme format things and fun stuff for everybody to view, just random stuff from streams from time to time. It's basically Saint's job. That's what Saint's going to be focusing on now. He's going to be building up those vertical platforms for everybody, because, oh, and YouTube Shorts, that one too. Yeah, we're going to be everywhere. At least we're going to try to be. If none of that works for you, then I suppose I will see you in the next video. Thank you for lending me your eyeballs, everyone. We'll see you real soon, okay? Peace.